Hampshire with our senior pastor, Quincy Worthington. So he's going to talk about magic worship, wonder, and ministry. So there you go.
All right, I was hoping I had a little bit longer there. Well, good evening.
Good evening.
I don't think I've ever been this nervous before doing a presentation, so cheers. So I wanted to talk to you all tonight about something that I've been finding really interesting, and I guess I should probably give the backstory on this, I think is where I want to begin. Because in order to understand where I'm going to take us kind of theologically and into the worship and ministry part, I think we've got to understand why the connection with magic and wonder. So that there is going to be a connection, I hope. We'll find out. So when I was a kid, I was borderline obsessed with magic. And I remember my parents bought me a magic book when I was a kid that looked really awesome. It came with a fake thumb, a silk scarf, a piece of latex, some string, and some rings. And that was about it. And it was the most impossible thing to do anything with that I'd ever seen in my entire life. And I figured, well, there's some things you've got talent at, and there's some things you don't. So magic was going to be like baseball for me, where it was one of those things that I really liked, but I was never going to be very good at. And then when October 29th, 1990, I was in the car with my sister, who's about 10 years older than me, driving to a birthday dinner for me, which is how I remember the date. It was my 10th birthday. And we're driving in the car, and at that time, people still had radios in the car as a predominant form of entertainment. And so we're listening to the radio, and on came an ad for David Copperfield, that he was going to be in Erie that night. And Erie is where I lived. And I was so jealous that David Copperfield was going to be in Erie, and that I wanted to go so badly, but there was just no way. I mean, they were already saying tickets were already sold out, which I don't know why they were having an advertisement on the radio if the tickets are sold out, except to torture me, I guess, is my 10th birthday. So we go to dinner, and we're sitting there, and it's time for me to open my presents. And I opened my presents, and my sister had gotten 2 tickets to see David Copperfield. So we went to see David Copperfield that night, and it blew my mind. It was one of the ones where he had a video of him walking through the Great Wall of China, which I grew concerned about. What if he accidentally took a left-hand turn and got stuck in the wall? I don't know what would have happened. Probably nothing good. But he didn't. He made it through. And he sawed himself in half and made a motorcycle disappear. And I just thought I wanted to get a white pirate shirt and have feathered hair like he did and wear tight leather pants. But at 10, my parents didn't think that was acceptable. So, there went those dreams too. And I'll be honest with you, something profound happened that night. And I can't tell you if it was an interview I saw with him later on one of his television specials, or if we actually talked with him afterwards. My memory on this isn't very clear. But somebody had asked David Copperfield, how did you learn how to do this? Or how can somebody learn how to do this? And he said, all the answers are in your library. That there's nothing he does that you can't find out by going to your library. I misunderstood him. I thought he meant my middle school library, and he didn't. I think he meant a real library. So I was a little disappointed, but it always planted a seed in me about maybe there were hidden truths in this world, or hidden knowledge, or the way to figure out the meaning of things that was located in books or in the library. And that if you just searched enough, you could find the answers that you're looking for. Come on in. Now you have to join us. So exactly.
We just started.
I'll just start over from the beginning. Good evening, everybody. It's nice to have you here.
Velva?
Yeah.
So you're going to want to see this, I think.
We'll see. So so I guess that really began by like pursuit of looking in libraries and books to find out things, was thanks to David Copperfield. I never did learn magic. I always would watch it on TV and things like that. Never thought I could learn it. And we'll fast forward then to maybe about a year ago, less than, probably about 6 months ago. I'm back home visiting my folks and stopping by to see some of my friends. I know you're going to be shocked if I tell you that my friends back home work in a tattoo parlor, but they do. And my friend Chris was there, and Chris has learned how to do magic for a few years now. And he pulled out some cards, and he did some tricks, and they absolutely blew my mind. And I thought they were utterly impossible. And then he said, "Do you want to learn how to do one?" And I said, "Sure." And so he showed me a trick, and I said, "That's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Nobody'd ever fall for that." And he said, "You just did 15 minutes ago." And I said, "Touche, Chris." And so then I came home. I showed the tricks to my kids. They kind of rolled their eyes at me, and we'll get to that reason in a little bit. And then that was about it until right after Christmas. I took 2 weeks off from here because it's good to take time off after Christmas if you work in the church. And I was feeling really burnt out. I spent the first week staring at the wall. One day my wife came home and said, "What'd you do today?" And I said, "I sat on the couch." And she said, "Did you watch anything on TV?" And I said, "No, I just sat here." And she was like, "Great, you're doing really well, aren't you, Quincy?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm feeling great." So I was just exhausted. And then I have ADHD pretty badly, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which means that I'm an intensely curious person, and I can be very compulsive about things. And so the way I describe this to people is like, you know when you're at a party and there's a bunch of people talking and you can't focus in on one voice? That's what my brain feels like when I'm not medicated. And there's an opposite effect of that, where then I hyper-focus on things as well. So what happens is I get a compulsion or an idea about something I want to do or learn about, being an intensively curious person, and then I can't stop thinking about it, and I just have to do it and have to get it nailed down. So I wake up one night, and I grab my computer, and I start researching. And my wife wakes up and says, "What in the world are you doing?" And I said, "I'm learning magic." And she said, "At 4 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday?" And I said, "Yeah." And she sighed and rolled over and went to bed. And so then that started this, I don't know why, but it was just over break. I needed something to do that wasn't God-related in my life, right? And so what better else than like, hey, that one card trick, fried my kids a little bit, so we'll try this. And it became an obsession for me. And from there, I think I've been learning a lot of stuff, and it's been helping me understand, I think, a lot about human nature and a lot about the relationship of God to us, and it's helped me figure out how to describe some theological concepts that I think are difficult for us to get our brain around. And even more importantly than that, I think what it's been doing is teaching me about the intentionality of what we're trying to do in church, specifically in worship, and maybe even more specifically around the sacraments. I find a very strong connection between, my wife is texting me right now in the middle of a lecture that she knows I'm giving. So I'm going to mute my there we go, do not disturb on.
I wouldn't do that.
I'll be in a little bit of trouble later, but it's all right. So, specifically around the sacraments, I think there's a strong connection. I've spent a lot of time the past few months trying to figure out what makes good magic good and what makes bad magic bad, because good magic is really good and bad magic is really bad, right? I can give you examples. I brought my laptop with me tonight. During this process, over break, I started Googling magic stuff and buying magic books and figuring out how to handle cards. And I got really good at picking up cards from all over my family room floor because that's usually where they ended it up. And it's funny, everybody, once I started getting a few tricks down and showing people, they'd be like, wow, you're getting really good at this. How cool is it? Like, does everybody think you're awesome at your house? And I'm like, you don't understand. I spend 4 hours a night basically picking up cards from my floor and under the couch. There's nothing cool about learning magic at all. And I know some guys, my friend Chris got in it because he thought he'd meet chicks. And that just shows how misguided people who like magic are, because that doesn't work that way. So as I'm doing this, I'm, Amazon gives you recommended books, and there's this one called Here's Real Magic, and I click on it and I order it just on a whim, and it comes in and I'm reading it. It's by this guy Nate Staniforth, and he's writing about being burnt out doing magic. He was newly married. He'd been working his whole life towards this goal. Now he's on the college tour. So he's traveling every week, and every week giving performance after performance. And he's lamenting the fact that he knows the Starbucks ladies at O'Hare International Airport better than he knows his wife at this point. And he's getting super tired of it. And then in the middle of one show, I think in Minnesota, he's got about a half hour left, and he just says, I'm done, and walks away. And I could relate to that feeling with being a pastor and having the weekly performance of Sunday, and kind of what we call the relentless pursuit of Sunday. And so what he does, and because he did it, I didn't have to, is he takes off to India to go try and recapture what it was he loved about magic, because India's got a very strong street magic performer tradition. And in that, he kind of rekindles his love of magic and what it is and the wonder that it can create. And I found very strong connections between that and my own studies in theology. And so I'm talking to my friend Chris, who's the one who got me into this mess in the first place with the magic. And I'm telling him how much this book means to me. And he says, the dude's a magician. He probably doesn't get a lot of fan mail, Quincy. It would probably be okay if you wrote him a letter, and maybe he'd respond. So I sent him a message on Facebook, because that's what we do now. We don't write letters in this generation. And I thought it was his official author page, so I figured it was going to some publicist or manager. Within about an hour, I wrote in the letter, you're probably not going to read this. I don't care. I'm getting it off my chest. I'm putting it out there how much your book means to me. And so I kind of told him my own story. Within an hour, he responds, and that became this kind of cool friendship we've had. And I'll show you a video of one of Nate's magic tricks in a little bit. So that's kind of been my draw into it. And what I've noticed, and why I think it's fascinating, my kids hate my magic, right? Partly because they're my kids. And so nothing their dad does is cool, right? They're a little bit older than you. That, and I practice on them a lot in the morning, and so they're just utterly tired of me. But there's also something I've noticed that I think is really important, that I worry about a bit. With kids, magic doesn't seem as impressive, because I think to them everything is still magical, right? So the wonder isn't... It isn't something crazy. And so the kids kind of are like, I told my daughter to pick a card, a few weeks ago. She pulls it out and she says, it's the Queen of Clubs. And I said, you're not supposed to tell me what the card is, honey. And she goes, you're gonna know anyways. And so that was, to her it was like, big deal, you can figure out the card. With adults, it's astonishing to them, right? And I think it is like, if you think back, when is the last time in your life, not that you were impressed, and I'm probably not going to do too much that's going to impress you tonight, but when's the last time you really felt that wonder? And I think that's what the connection between good magic and bad magic is. bad magical performances are the ones where it's look at me and look at what I can do. And it doesn't say anything. Good magic is magic that's trying to convey something to you or show you something about who you are. It's the idea that maybe there's a stranger that can know me so intimately right off the bat that they can guess what card I'm thinking of. Right? That there's something that reaches beyond just the experience of what it is. And magic is fiction. It's a trick. Some people call it a lie. I was home practicing on my parents because my dad had a hip replacement surgery, which meant he was on a lot of good drugs, which meant everything I did was utterly mind-blowing to the man. He was the best audience I ever had in my entire life for anything. And my mom said, "You're cheating." And I said, "What do you mean, Mom?" And she goes, "You're either using some type of trick or it's a sleight of hand." And I said, "Right." She says, "So it's not real." She's just like, "So you're cheating?" And I'm like, "You mean it's as opposed to what, Mom? Like real magic? Like I'm really doing this?" And she was like, "Wait, you know what I mean?" And I thought about it. I looked at her and I said, "Mom, when you went and saw Jurassic Park in the movie theater, did you get pissed off at Steven Spielberg because he didn't use real dinosaurs?" And she was like, "What? That's different." I'm like, "No, it's not. It's not." You know, I think the difference is, and this is where it ties into worship, and we'll get into this a little bit more, is a good magician is trying to create that moment of wonder, that moment of astounding, that moment that maybe there's more to this world than it appears. And maybe there are things that we still don't understand, that we still can't explain, that can still impress us. Good worship does a very similar thing, right? Except in religious terms, we call it creating a thin space, right? We're trying to create that wonder in worship, but what we're trying to do in good worship is create a room for people to encounter the divine, to think that maybe the divine still works and acts and breathes in this world in ways that we might not understand, that things are beyond explanation sometimes, that there's something bigger than ourselves. So that's that point there. Any questions so far? Did any of that make any sense whatsoever?
Yeah.
Okay, good, because sometimes I feel like I'm rambling. So, well, what do you want to do now? That was pretty good, right?
I'd like to see a trick.
You want to see a trick?
I want to see a trick, a lie. I'd like to see you lie to me. You're gonna lie to me.
Okay, Wally.
Caster is lying.
Yeah, that's the other neat thing about magic, right? Is like in church, I try to be very intentional about being as honest as I possibly can be about things. And then with magic, I can honestly admit to you I'm lying, right? One of the best moments that I've had is my friend Aaron, who was actually here for that other guy's installation. What's his name? Austin, right. It's been a long day. I have not slept much. For Austin's installation, my friend Aaron was here for it. And my friend Aaron can be kind of pushy, and he made me the designated driver for his 30-some-odd birthday. That's the problem when you're a recovering alcoholic and you don't drink and all your friends know it, is you become the designated driver and you're everybody's best friend. So there I am at the bar, which is, one of my favorite places in the world to be. And they're drinking and having a good time, and I'm bored out of my gourd. So I'm drinking coffee, and I brought my playing cards with me. And Aaron was like, "Do you just bring playing cards with you everywhere you go?" And I'm like, "Yeah, don't you?" You're like, "You're the weirdo." And so I'm sitting there playing, and the waitress is being nice to me because I'm drinking coffee. And she says, "What are you doing there?" And I said, "I'm playing with cards." And she said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, here, pick one." And I had her pick a card and then put it back. And then I put the cards back in the box. And then I had her hold on to my left hand with both of her hands, which my friends thought was an excuse to get a pretty lady to hold my hand, which I'm married, so it wasn't. But, especially since my wife's texting me during this. And so then I tell her, "I want you to think of your card. And I'm going to guess your card." So I'm sitting there and I'm fumbling around with it. I go, do you feel that? Like, is it getting, are your hands getting warmed? And she said, yeah, I guess a little bit. I was like, okay. And I'm like, so it's a red card? She's like, yeah, it's a red card. I'm like, man, your hands are getting really hot. And she's like, okay. And then, I kept going. And then finally I pulled my hand away like I was being burned. I was like, what did you do to me? And she's like, what? I'm like, was your card the Ace of Hearts? And she's like, yeah. And I was like, what did you do? Because I have an Ace of Hearts tattooed on my hand. And that's where I learned that if you're going to do magic, you need to warn people that that's what you're going to do, because she freaked out. It was not. So we were going to be doing some magic. It is not real. The tattoo of my hand is already there. She's like, I am so sorry. Oh my God. I got free coffee that night though, so it worked out well. All right, Wally. So here, come on up. I'll show you the first trick I ever learned, Wally.
Can I send her up?
No.
You're the one who wanted to see the trick.
Suck it up.
Go on. No, go on. No, you go. Go on. Do it. Do it.
Will somebody get up here? It's going to be a pretty lame trick if I'm guessing my own cards, right? All right, so just so you know, all the cards are different, right? No two cards are the same?
I would hope not.
Yeah, I would hope not too, because that would be really awkward. All right, so there we go. So now I'm going to spread out the cards, and you are going to tell me when to stop. Pick a card.
Stop.
Stop. Which one you want?
This one.
You want that one there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I want you
Take
to
it.
look at the card. Yeah, I'll close my eyes. You can show everybody else.
Okay.
All right, did you do it?
I did.
Okay, now put it on top there. We'll put it there. Now, some magicians, they'll hold a thumb break there. That's a secret. So we put the card back and they know where it is. But you can see, I have no idea where your card is. Now I'm going to find your card. You ready?
Mm-hmm. Am I supposed to tell you?
No, don't do anything.
Oh.
Don't do anything. Let me guess.
Okay.
We can do one where I guess from your reaction later if you want. You did put it in here though, right?
Yes.
Okay. You're sure?
I don't know. You tell me.
Well, I thought you did.
Put it over there.
No. Okay, what if I told you the next card I flip over is going to be your card? Yeah?
You can tell me that.
She's like your daughter.
Do you believe me?
Nope.
No? You want to bet?
Yeah.
How much you want to bet?
How much you got in your wallet?
Whoa.
Well.
This is getting real at church today, bud.
Yeah.
I've got,
$1. I'll bet you.
you'll bet me $1. The next card I flip over will be your card.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. I knew you were gonna do that.
Oh,
Is
man.
that your card?
Yeah.
Yep. Don't feel bad. I lost $20 to Chris on that trick. So
That was a little tricky there with your wordage.
yeah. Thank you.
I owe you $1.
You put it on the offering plate. That's how we're gonna make that budget this year.
Tell him to go get that.
Oh yeah.
quick.
Go get this, Mr. Quincy.
Oh, geez. Thank you very much.
You had to do
Nice
that.
work, Ryan.
You bet. To a magician. You're a magician. You haven't learned.
So
nothing.
those are kind of fun. And then what I found interesting about magic was there are other principles you can apply that I'd studied. Things like psychology and human reaction and trying to understand how people work and think. And so there are other ways of doing things where you can figure that out. Does anybody else want to volunteer?
All right, guys.
I'll volunteer.
All right, sure, come on up.
Do it, Jeremiah. All right, here we go.
What's your name?
Jeremiah.
Jeremiah, right, okay. Quincy. We've met before.
Well, I don't know that we have, actually. We've been coming here, but I don't think we've actually put,
We've been
hands
waiting
to
that
hands,
line.
yeah.
Yeah. There we go. All right, so there we go. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Good. Chuck that one
Here's
up.
$1 for that.
All right, somebody else.
It's going up.
All right. Do you want me to shuffle these more? You want to shuffle them?
I trust you,
Okay.
maybe.
Let's go. All right. So now I want you to pick a card and look at it, and then set it face down on the table.
All right.
So any card you want. Okay. So there you are. That's your card. Now, do you want me to shuffle these? What we're going to do is we're going to randomly select 4 of the cards out of here.
Okay.
Do you want me to do that, or do you want to do that?
Shuffle.
You'll shuffle them and do it? All right. I'm going to drink some water while you do.
All right, hydrate.
Yeah, it's important.
Ah.
Well, hello, Mr. Fancy Pants. That's one thing that's nice is I'm terrible at shuffling cards. I can only do like the casino shuffles. And so my friends are like, well, you're not using sleight of hand because you're terrible at shuffling
Do it.
cards. All right, so you want me to select them or you want to select them?
I'll select them.
Okay, go for it.
All right. You said 4 additional?
Yeah, just 4 random cards.
That one, take that guy, and take that guy.
Okay, now what I want you to do is I want you to put those cards on top of your card.
Okay.
I'm going to move these cards out of the way.
Okay.
We're not going to need those. All right, now I want you to mix all those cards together so we don't know which one is which or what. You remember what your card is,
I do.
right? Because if you forget, then that really kind of just blows the trick. Okay, you're satisfied they're all mixed up?
I am.
Okay, so now we take the cards and I'm going to lay them out like this. Now this is very important because some people really mess this part up, okay? And that ruins the trick. And I'll tell you why. I'm going to hold on to your hand right around the wrist. I'm going to move your hand over each one of these cards.
Okay.
And I'm going to ask you one question. I'm going to ask you, is this your card? And your job is to lie to me.
All right.
And say yes every time. So even if I put your hand over a card that is not yours, and I say, is this your card? You're going to answer
Yes.
yes.
Okay.
Right. I did this with somebody else, and they went, no. And I was like, well, okay, this is going to be really easy then. You're making my job a lot easier. So, all right, can I, all right, so here we go.
All right.
All right. Is this your card?
Yes.
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 That one's not your card. Is this your card?
Yes.
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 And this is your card?
Yes.
And this is your card?
Yes.
That's not your card. And this is not your card. Is this your card?
Yes.
Is this your card?
Yes.
This is where it gets hard. Unless I've already eliminated your card. But it doesn't feel like it. Is this your card?
Yes.
Is this your card?
Yes.
That's not your card. That's your card. Yeah?
All right, good.
Thank you. Awesome.
Good job, Joe.
Yeah.
Huh? Yeah?
Pretty tricky.
Yeah, see, that was the trick that, so there are a few different tricks. I could show you one that freaked out my daughter, Olivia, who's 10. That one freaked out my son, Isaac, who was 12, because I said, this is a human lie detector test. I can tell when you're lying to me. And so now, you know, I'll ask him a question. Did you do your homework? He's like, yeah. I'm like, it's all done? I'm like, yeah. Let me see your wrist, Isaac. Okay, all right, it's not done, Dad. I'm sorry.
Awesome.
So totally not a fan of that trick, my son. Yeah. I am in a little bit. I want to show you this trick that Nate does, and it's mind blowing. He talks about it in the beginning of this book. Here's magic, or here's real magic. I showed this video to my mother, and my mom is very similar to Isaac, which has made me think of this, where Isaac, if he can't figure out how you're doing something, like he knows his dad is not a wizard. And so it really ticks him off that I can do things that he can't explain, but he doesn't want to take the time to learn. Because I said, I'll teach you how to do it. No. So he takes after his grandmother because she is the same way. So I showed her this trick, and a few days later, I'm down at breakfast, and usually the deal I had with them was every day at breakfast I would show my parents a magic trick, which was good for me to practice. My parents are lovely people who support me in anything, so even if I messed up the trick, they're like, hey, that's great. And so it gave me a chance to practice, and they enjoyed it. And so one day we're down there, it was like 3 days after I'd shown them this video. I'd completely forgotten about it. My mom goes, well, I was up till 3 in the morning. I think I finally figured out how it was done. I was like, what are you talking about? And she's like, your friend Nate's little trick. And she goes into the most contrived explanation of this thing that I've ever, I mean, like, I don't think engineers from MIT could have reversed engineered this thing like my mother had, right? And she's like, so now you're going to call him and you're going to tell him, right, that I figured out his trick? I'm like, Mom, I don't think you figured it out. And she was like, well, you're going to call him and ask him, aren't you? And I'm like, no, I don't want to know how he does the trick, because that's the bad thing about doing this is you learn how these things are done, and then it's not fun anymore. You know how it's done. And that ties into worship too, which we'll talk about. And so then, I hear on the phone with my sister, be like, and your brother has this handsome friend who's a magician, and he won't tell him how to do the trick, and blah, blah, blah. So I told my mom, if she kept harassing me, I was going to tell Nate that she said he was handsome. And Nate and I had that conversation recently, which was fun for me. But I'm going to show you that trick in a little bit. Part of the reason why I never wanted to learn how to do that trick, and I made Nate promise not to show me, one is because he sells it in a book for $300 that he made a limited editions of, and now they go for about $1,000. And I very nearly bought a copy of it when I first found out about the trick because I was that curious about it. But what I found is both about worship and about magic is that when you learn how these tricks are done, you can go home tonight and you can Google how I did everything, and I'm going to do everything that I'm about to show you. And you can find out the answer to how it's done. And if you're like me, you're going to find out how it's done. You're going to say, that's the stupidest thing in the world. Nobody's going to fall for that. And then you're going to remember, I totally fell for that earlier, which is kind of a fun experience, but it ruins it kind of ruins the mystery. But what I found is, through watching other magicians, is that there's a different kind of mystery. There's a deeper appreciation to what they're doing. And I've discovered something about, if I thought a mentalist could really read my mind, then anything they're doing is not really all that exciting. Because if they're a mentalist and can really read my mind, then they're just pulling the thoughts out of my brain. But if they don't have that power, and yet they're still figuring out what's going on, then that's pretty impressive. And I thought about that a lot with the Bible, because as an academic by training, I know I really look like an academic, but as an academic by training and somebody who went through graduate degrees and had to study the Bible and learn about it from what's called the historical critical perspective, which means that they tear the thing apart. They tear it apart by its original language. They tear it apart by the cultural setting. They tear it apart by who they think wrote it and who authored it, and make you write horrible long papers called exegetical papers that were just utter torture to write. And then one professor would have one standard for how you do it, and another would have another, and so you'd never learn how to do these papers correctly, and it would drive you nuts. And if you ever want to suck the fun out of the Bible, take seminary level courses on the Bible. And what you find then, there are authors like Bart Ehrman, who was a very devout Christian, who went through that process, and it killed his faith. Because what you find out, I think, is that for whatever the Bible may or may not be, it's a very human book. And that's not saying that God isn't a part of it, because I very much think God is. But even though God is very much a part of that book, and I think at the very essence and core of that book, it was put together by people. flawed people. People talk about the inerrancy of Scripture. I'm here to tell you that there are grammatical and spelling errors in the Scripture. So I don't know how inerrant it is. So what I found was that the mystery I was looking for when I started my religious education, very much like magic, wasn't the mystery I ended up with. Right? Because what I found out was a magic trick is a trick. It's a fiction. It's like the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. I'm not saying Scripture's fiction. What I'm saying is that regardless of its factual correctness, there's a truth there. And that truth to me is more important than fact. And when I found out that the Bible was a very human document, the mystery changed from being, well, God wrote this book, to what made these writings so important to the lives of these people that they would want to keep and preserve and pass these down and protect them and even die for them in many cases. Like what is so important about how they're understanding God in these texts that I need to understand? And to me, that's where the mystery shifted from not... It moved away from being questions like, why did God create a flood? To, regardless of if that flood happened or not, what is that story trying to tell me about the nature of God? And what I found was that, in a very real sense, things like if the world was created in 7 literal 24-hour days or not, that doesn't affect how Quincy Worthington is going to live his life here and now today, right? But if I look at that story and try and figure out what the truth of that story is and what these people are trying to convey to me about the nature of their creator and that creator's relationship into its creation, then suddenly I'm starting to understand something about the nature of God and God's relationship to my life. And that's a very different mystery to me than why would God create the world in 7 days and why did God pick the order God did, right? That's an interesting question, but it's almost like if God microwaved a burrito so hot that not even God could eat it, is that possible, right? I'm never going to have answers to that, and it's not going to affect my daily life. But when I realize that there's something powerful about saying that God used to walk hand in hand with Adam in the cool of the day in the garden, that there was that intimate of a relationship there, and that relationship somehow got fractured through essentially our own knowledge of good and evil, this idea that we could think like and be of our own gods and our own determiners of what's right and wrong, right? Like that starts to affect how I understand my relationship with God today, right? And then what that does then is it then puts a different emphasis on why I need a Savior. Why do I need somebody to heal that relationship? Right? Now, if I took that as a literal story of, well, God used to walk with Adam in a garden in the cool of the day, I mean, that's pretty cool. I mean, Adam's pretty lucky. But now I'm starting to realize what that's saying about my own relationship with God. And so for me, the mystery's changed. And I don't think I ever really viewed it in those terms until I started doing magic tricks, oddly enough. And so I'll give you another example, and then I'm going to show you another trick, and then maybe I'll show you Nate's video, and then we'll probably do one more trick and we'll be out of time. So I'm not sure how much time you guys allotted. I could be here all night talking because that's just, I get excited about this stuff. What was I just about to say before I ranted about what I was going to do?
Conjure up the winning lotto numbers?
No, I can't do that. But I wouldn't be sitting here if I could do that. Sacraments. This is the other thing I realized through doing magic tricks. I've always struggled with the Presbyterian understanding of sacraments, specifically the Lord's Supper. Let me explain what I mean by that in case there are people who aren't Presbyterians or haven't been Presbyterians for a while or aren't currently Presbyterians. Nobody's perfect. It's okay. You're still welcome here. one of the areas where we differ from almost every other denomination is our understanding of the Lord's Supper. It's not even so much in baptism. We differ from the Baptists in baptism, but one of the distinct contrasts you can see that only Calvin does is in the Lord's Supper. If we were to I never know how to use liberal and conservative anymore these days because there's so much baggage put on any of those terms. But let's say this. Let's say transubstantiation is the most conservative viewpoint you can have on the sacraments, right? So the Roman Catholic view, and I'm not a calligrapher, I am a theologian and a magician, so I don't write things. So the Roman Catholic view, right, is in transubstantiation. I'm just going to put that. So what transubstantiation is, just for those of you who might not have a Roman Catholic background, although I feel like there are probably more former Catholics in membership of our church than there are lifelong Presbyterians, which is great. Transubstantiation comes off of a notion that Plato has, where the substance of an object can be changed, but not the nature, right? And so the nature of the bread and wine stays the same. That's why it still tastes like bread and wine. It took me a while to figure that out. But the substance of the bread and wine have changed to the literal body and blood of Christ, right? That's why Roman Catholics don't like for us to partake in their communion. It isn't something where they're being elitist. It's just we don't have that understanding of it turning into the literal body and blood of Christ. And so it's a matter of kind of respect for their beliefs that that's what they do believe, right? So that would be let's say that's the most conservative. And then we move over here to what would be the most liberal, which would be a view, it's a Zwinglian view. There's not going to be a test on any of this. But Zwingli believes that the meal is strictly, it's a memorial meal, right? Jesus says, remember me. And so that's all we're doing is we're just remembering him. So if that's the most conservative and this is the most liberal, that's the scale I'm using if I'm talking liberal and conservative here. I'm not saying that the Republicans believe this and the Democrats believe that as far as communion goes, because I'm sure they're probably just as varied as anybody else. You have Luther, right, in the Lutheran Church, and they are, moderate conservative, very conservative, moderate conservative. Christ is present in the body and blood, but it's not his body and blood, in the bread and wine, but it's not his body and blood, but Christ is in the elements themselves, right? So when you're taking the elements, you're eating Christ. Not quite as conservative as transubstantiation, but still pretty conservative. Then you would have Calvin and the Reformed view here, where we say, Jesus bread, not so much, but there's something more than just a memorial going on here. It's not simply remembering. Christ is somehow present, right? Methodists fall more in this camp. Episcopalians more over here. All the other denominations kind of spread out there. So we believe that somehow Christ is present with us in the meal, but maybe not in the actual elements themselves. Every other denomination in the world believes that Christ comes down and eats supper with us, if they don't believe that Christ is in the actual elements themselves. That Christ is somehow present with us and has come down to eat with us. Calvin liked that idea. He wasn't so hip on the idea. He thought there was a bigger connection. So what Calvin says, and he knows he's using metaphorical language. I always joke with people, we don't announce that you have to put your pews to the upright position and fasten your seatbelts. Calvin believed that the church gets lifted up into heaven, and that's where the banquet happens. And the question is, okay, so that's not really happening, Pastor. And someone could argue, well, that's not really happening either, guys. But what did Calvin mean by that then? He knew he was using symbolic language. Calvin believed that what was going on, and Presbyterians affirm this today, that we're eating with people from all different, from every Christian, every person of faith that ever was, every person of faith that ever will be, every person of faith that's alive today that would share communion. We're all gathered together and eating. That's the kind of meal this is. That's how powerful what's going on in communion is, right? And what I struggle with is that unlike the Roman Catholics, we don't really believe in what some people would call the hocus pocus of it. It's not that a priest has to speak specific words at a specific time in a specific way with specific actions in the service to create a magical moment where something is transformed, but yet we're not willing to abandon it to the fact where, well, nothing's happening. And so then the question is, what is happening? Right? What is happening? And what I've learned, and I think what this is teaching me a bit, is that what makes this powerful isn't so much that I find your card. Card tricks are stupid, right? There are really only two kind of card tricks. I find your card, I make your card disappear. That's about it. Everything else is a variation of a theme. And they're just stinking cards. Like I'm not finding lottery tickets or curing cancer or healing people. I'm determining whether or not you're lying to me about which card is yours. I mean, kind of cool, but who cares, right? But what's happening here is that I think what's happening is the walls are being broken down. We're finding moments of wonder, and you're establishing relationships and connections and having encounters with people, right? And so the magic trick isn't so much about the magic trick itself, right? Like, we're going to do something in a little bit that if it actually works, and I sure hope it does, because it'll be really awesome, and I'll be pretty impressed with myself if this trick works. It's going to be hard to explain, and it's pretty cool. But it's not so much about the trick itself, right? None of this tonight is about the tricks themselves. They're fun. They create wonder. But that's what it's about. It's about that wonder. It's about that moment, about that experience, about that encounter, the moment that we're sharing with each other, right? And the hope then is around, at least with good magic, is that if you can find wonder and curiosity and the idea that maybe there's something more to the world that you thought, and something as stupid as a deck of cards, then imagine what happens when you leave this room or you leave the magic show and you go out into the real world and you're looking at the world around you and you see a sunset, right? Or you see other things. I mean, the world is surrounded full of wonder. You know, things, lightning's cool when you think it's lightning bolt, thunder out of the sky hitting the ground, but when you realize that lightning is striking this earth at every second, at every moment, and how the lightning's formed, like, it becomes even that much more powerful, right? And so that's part of what we're doing, and I think that's exactly what communion's trying to show us. When we say that Christ is present here, it's not so much about, well, Quincy said some words, he said them in the right order, at the right time of the service, broke the bread in the right way, poured the cup in the right cup, and then boom, magic happened, right? It's not a magic trick. It's not a magic trick. Nothing magical is happening at communion. It's nothing I'm saying. There's no secret incantation. What's happening there, though, is if we can get together around that table, all of us, from every varying point of view and life experience and encounter we've had, and we can gather around that table together and say, this is where we encounter Christ. And because we're together, and because we're sharing this meal together, we recognize that something powerful is happening here, that is more than just a meal of remembrance. But we feel like we're encountering the sacred here, that we're present with Christ. If we can do that around that table with just a piece of bread and half a shot of grape juice, and if we're lucky, it's Welch's grape juice, and we can feel and see Christ in that moment around that table, then the idea is very much the same as the magic show. Is what is preventing us then from seeing Christ around every other table. And it's not so much the ritual, it's not so much the liturgy, it's not so much the environment, all those things are created and very intentional in trying to make that space where we see Christ thinner. It's been perfected or working on being perfected for centuries, to be very intentional about opening the space for that encounter. But it's just trying to open that space. It's not the encounter itself, right? And so if we can go into worship or into sacraments with the same ideas that this is trying to open the space for us to find the encounter here because it's a practice run for around every other table we're at, then that's where Christian discipleship and the true, I guess, magic and mystery of faith and worship begins to happen. It's in that moment there. Does that make sense? I feel like I lost like everybody there. Any questions around that at all? You okay?
I'm okay.
I think keeping the wonder is important. I mean, just like the wonder in the sunset, like you said, the wonder in Mother Nature, and the awe,
Yeah.
the awe of life. Faith is very much like that. It's the awe and the wonder. And the relationship.
So are you saying Christ is more with us when we gather at a table like that, or just Christ is with us always? Or, because I feel like Christ is with me always.
Yeah, see, that's what I think. And I think I don't think it's that Christ is more present with us. I think it's that we've opened ourselves up and created a space to where maybe we're more open to feeling that presence than we generally would be in other places.
So this is more deliberate.
Yeah.
Okay. More intentional, okay.
And isn't it, it's a collective, it's a communion of all of, our collective faith. I think that opens that up even more. You can feel that openness in everyone else, that flow of that awe and faith.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. In fact, for Presbyterians, we're never allowed to have communion outside of worship, right? And we're not allowed to have private communion. The only time I've really heard of private communion is like at Roman Catholic weddings sometimes, where the bride and groom will have it. But we believe that it has to be a community event in the context of worship, of everybody being together because of that, precisely because of that.
What's that way in Greek Orthodox? True, it's just two, because they become one, they have communion together on the altar in front of God. So they're having their first communion as one.
Interesting. I've never realized the justification, I guess, for that. That's interesting.
So the people at the wedding do not participate in communion at all?
We're just there to
They
watch.
just watch.
Yeah.
Witness.
It's kind of like the unity candle.
Well, no, the
Yeah.
witnesses, we're just there, I mean, we have people to witness, but yeah, so, it is nice, I mean, they have communion on Sundays, but that's why the bride and groom do it.
Yeah. All right, do you want to see Nate's trick?
What
Sure.
denomination was Zwingli?
What's that?
What denomination was
Zwingli formed his own denomination, except instead of him calling it Zwingliism, like Lutheran did, I think Zwingli realized his name was harder to pronounce. So Zwingli actually is the father of the Reformed tradition, of the Reformed Church, right? And so the Reformed Church comes out of the Reformation, but not every church out of the Reformation is a Reformed congregation, right? And Zwingli's actually interesting because he's the only one who's like the patriarch of the faith he founded that gets like zero credit for it. That's not like considered the theologian of it. So Zwingli forms it. Calvin, who's a French lawyer who had was going to seminary and then didn't because the lawyers probably get paid well. I actually went the opposite way. I almost went to law school and then went to seminary. So, you know, so Calvin goes to Geneva, Switzerland and studies under Zwingli. And so Calvin gets all the credit for, and really he should, because most of what we understand the Reformed tradition to be now is based off of John Calvin's thought and not off of Zwingli's thought, because, you know, the memorial is a perfect example. Zwingli wasn't even sure about baptism. I mean, he was pretty liberal by today's standards even, you know, so you can imagine by the 1500 standards, he'd be considered pretty radical too.
Surprised they didn't burn him at the stake or something.
Yeah,
He
well,
escaped that.
Calvin did that sometimes to people, so,
Pretty scary in the world.
yeah.
Still is.
All right, should we see Nate's trick? Nate's been doing this much longer than I have.
More than 6 months, more than 3 months?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lottery trick, Wally. Look at that.
There you go, there you go.
Listen now,
Oh, great.
the problem,
Now I gotta figure out how to get the audio to switch over to the TV.
Well, it sounded pretty loud.
I bet you this will be better.
when you're a magician, and every magician has this problem, and some of them don't care about it at all, and I probably care about it too much. The problem when you're a magician is this. In a minute, something's going to happen on stage that is so clearly impossible that you're not going to know what to think, right? You're going to go home tonight, you're going to be lying in bed, unable to sleep, thinking, shit, you know.
Sorry about the language.
What in the world was that, right? And it sounds, listen. It sounds like I'm bragging, but I'm not. I'm absolutely not. Because here's what's going to happen. All of you are then going to do the following. You're going to turn over. You're going to close your eyes, and you're going to say to yourself, before you drift into a deep and peaceful sleep, screw it. He's just a magician. It's just a magic trick. I don't care anymore. I'm going to sleep, right? Listen. Last year I did 130 shows. I got on stage 130 times and completely and totally failed each time to make this stuff resonate with the audience. I'm not a good enough performer. I'm not a good enough communicator. I'm not a good enough magician to make this stuff glow in the dark for you. I'm just not there yet. However, and this is a big however, I am good enough to take just a few people, and show them something they will never, ever, ever be able to just dismiss as a magic trick. Before we do anything, I'm going to put my wallet on this stool. I just want you to see that it's out in the open from the beginning. I'll get back to it in a minute. I need to pick some random people out of the audience. If I were to go down into the audience and ask people to help, the obvious solution would be that I'd set this up with someone. So I'm going to crumple up an old poster. I'm going to turn around and throw this over my shoulder. If it comes to you, I want you to just catch it and stand up. Fair? All right. Pick it up, stand up. I'd like you to stay standing, throw it again. Whoever catches it, would you please, sir, would you stand up? Would you throw it again? Would you stay standing? Throw it over again, yeah. That's 1, 2, 3, we have 4. Would you kick it over so everybody can hear? Just throw it again, but bring it back so everybody can see what's going on. Yeah, if you catch it, yep, would you stand up? That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I need one more person. Will you just throw it behind you? All right, would you stand up as well? All right. For everyone that's standing, I want you to just think of a number that's somewhere between 1 and 50. The only rule is you can't use a number that someone else has already said. So if someone else uses your number, I want you to just think of a new one. Is that fair? All right, so I'm going to start down here. What's the number that you thought of? 27. All right, I want everyone around here to just remember 27. What's your number? 39. So we have 27, 39. What's your number? 13. So we have 27, 39, 13. Sir, what's your name? Austin, what's your number? 4. Next number is 4. Fifth number. What's your name? Brooke. Number between 1 and 50. What is it? 22. All right, and the last number, sir. What number would you like? 2. Last number is 2. Okay. If you want to think of this as a trick, that is certainly your prerogative. But I would just say that you would agree there's no way I could have set this up like in this massive paper ball throwing conspiracy. There's no way I could have controlled where the ball was thrown or what numbers were said, right? All of you, can you just agree that we've never met before? This isn't all a setup, right? If you want to think of this as a coincidence, that's fine as well. But the odds of this working by chance alone are in the trillions. Doesn't matter. I mean, I don't care how you think about this. The point is that something extraordinary has happened. What's your name, sir? Chad. Would you join me on stage for a minute? Round of applause for Chad. Chad, say hello. Hello. Okay. Chad, what was your last number? Was 2? 2. So here's the thing. Inside my wallet's been sitting here the entire time, right? Okay. In my wallet, I want you to just see this. There's a lottery ticket, right? Now it's not a winning lottery ticket. It didn't win or anything. But I think you'll find the numbers on it really interesting. Would you just read those out loud so everybody can hear them?
27, 39, 13, 4, 22, and 2.
Chad, shake my hand, man. You got a seat. Thank you. All right. Coming up. I want to show you a movie.
So that was Nate's magic trick. Way better than me. All right, Nate, be quiet. Come on, man. There we go.
Where is he from?
Iowa City. Nate, I told you to be quiet. What is going on here? Yeah, he lives in Iowa City. All right, you want to help me out with something? One last trick. This one's easy. All I need you to do is I need you to pick a card, and I need you just to hold on to it, okay? And then I'm going to ask you for it. You can come. You want to sit right next to me? All right. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to riffle through these cards. You know what that means? I'm going to go like this. All right, watch. I'm going to do it once for you. I'm going to go like this, and you're just going to tell me when to stop, okay? And then I'm going to hand you a card, and you're not even going to look at it. You're just going to hold it to your chest, all right? And then we're going to talk for a little bit, and then I'm going to ask you for that card. Does that sound good? Can you do that? All right, you ready? You tell me when to stop.
Stop.
Okay. So I want you to pick that card right there. You got it? Hold it to your chest. Don't show me. Don't show anybody. Are you ready for this? So at 3:30 today, you can ask Michael. He's the building manager. I came in here and I stuck an envelope under one of these chairs. You know who's sitting on that chair? This is perfect. Wally's sitting on that chair. That's Wally right there. So under Wally's chair, there's an envelope, right?
Get out.
Yeah. Can you pull it off the bottom there?
No, you do.
So Miss Sherry there, she's gonna hold on to that,
Okay.
and she's not gonna open that, right? So I stuck that under the chair at 3:30, and then today, right before this started, you know what I did? That's Mrs. Rhodes over there. I asked her to go outside with me, and what we did was I told her to clear a space in her mind, and then think of a card that she picked, and to keep thinking about it throughout the whole day, okay? And then just throughout this whole presentation. And I didn't know what that card was. I told her not to write it down. I told her not to tell anybody what card she was thinking of, that she just had to keep thinking of that card. And then, just a minute ago, I had you pick a card that you haven't seen and I haven't seen and nobody else here has seen, right? Would you agree with me on that? All right, now watch this. Mrs. Rhodes, what card did you pick?
9 of diamonds.
9 of diamonds. Sherry, what's in that envelope? Nine
Oh,
of diamonds.
mackerel.
Now, what card did you pick?
9 of
Oh, boom, we did it. High five. Good job. You picked the right card.
Good job,
That
buddy.
is amazing.
Boy, if you would have picked the wrong card, that would have been the end of me tonight, huh? I think you've earned this $1, so I'll trade you the $1 for my card back. Good deal. All right, thank you. All right, I think we better end on a high note there. So let's say a prayer. Let's close in prayer, shall we? Gracious God, we thank you that we can come together tonight and that we can explore you through not just kind of the conventions of religion, but through the conventions of our imagination, of our curiosity, of our wonder. And we can remember that, God, in many ways, you are and remain a mystery. And in many ways, your word in Scripture speaks to mystery and isn't something that wants to be figured out, let alone that can be figured out. That around us, we're surrounded by mystery and wonder in your presence. And the hope is then, God, that in times like this and in times of worship, where we kind of discover that mystery and wonder, or remember that mystery and wonder, that we can feel your presence. That as we go out from these times, that they're practice runs for how we view the rest of creation, that we find mystery and wonder in you all around us, working in ways beyond our comprehension sometimes. And help us to remember that it's nothing to be feared, God. That usually what you have planned is so beyond our wildest expectations. That it isn't always for us to know or to understand, but it's to trust that you are there, even in our unknowing, even when we can't understand, even when life seems like a mystery. And we thank you then, God, that there are ways that we do get to know you and that you have revealed yourself to us, specifically through the life and person and death and resurrection of Jesus. So we ask your help in trying to claim that knowledge through Christ of you and of your love and of your grace for all of us. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Thank you for coming. I hope this was...
Nice. Yeah.